What's up, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. On this episode of the podcast, we welcome on Saoirse Rafferty from A Good Kind of Scary. Now, I've known Saoirse for years. We grew up together, went to primary school together, and she has grown up just down the road from me. So, Saoirse, thank you so much for jumping on. How are you getting on?
Good, thanks, Robbie. I love how you threw in primary school in there. I kind of forgot about that.
Had to.
The 1 year in primary school there together, but had to be thrown in.
But I've probably known you a lot longer than that, realistically. But let's talk a small bit about what you're doing at the moment. You're running a podcast, A Good Kind of Scary. Of course, you're living in between Australia and Bali, and you're teaching people how to journal a small bit. So I guess, where did the name come out? A Good Kind of Scary.
Yeah, so A Good Kind of Scary. It was actually something like a year ago. I remember I was just sitting in my bed, as I am right now. But I was reading about fear, and I think I just read this paragraph, and I remember the author, I think it was is it Amy Poehler? She's like a comedian. Not a book that was life-changing, but just this one paragraph. She talked about fear and how oftentimes in life, she's just sick of being scared of things that aren't that scary, and how she's sick of putting herself through unnecessary fears like roller coasters or horror movies. And she said, I think, bad kind of scary. And then I just started to think a lot oh my God, a good kind of scary. And I started to think about what would that mean? And then I was okay, it's kind of the things that you maybe are scared to try, but will benefit you. So for me at that time, last year, I was thinking about starting a blog for a while. And it wasn't even the starting the blog that was scary. It was the sharing it with people, and that fear of what will people think. But yeah, once I kind of started to think, a good kind of scary, it's scary, but it's a positive way forward for me and something I want to do. So that was kind of the whole idea behind the name of what started as a blog and then moved on to a podcast. And now I have, started my own course to help people navigate that feeling of fear and how they can actually use fear to move them forward.
Yeah. Okay. And what I suppose, talking about that then, what is your background? Is in journalism, isn't it? I know you used to run a radio station in Galway for a small while. What was it?
Run a radio station. I had a radio show in a radio station, but I'll take it.
What's the difference?
Go on.
So you had that in college. What is your background that led you down this path?
Yeah, so if you look at the whole college background, I did study journalism in my undergrad, but I also couldn't fully commit to journalism when I chose it. I chose journalism through arts in Galway rather than just a pure journalism course somewhere. I wanted to have more options, and I think the reason was I remember going to the Galway Open Day and I sat in on a psychology lecture. And I was you know what? I think I'd like to help people and learn more about people. So I was always kind of torn between the two, of this love for maybe wanting to create and write, and then actually wanting to learn more about people. And I feel in one way, studying both of those worked out perfectly for me, even though at the time people were well, what do you want to be?
Yeah.
It's are you going to be a psychologist? So I was I don't know. No. Are you going to be a journalist? Are you going to be a teacher? But I couldn't. It's I didn't like being confined to one thing. So if you're looking at interests with degrees and qualifications, that kind of, I very much lean towards having an interest in learning about myself and the way that I think, and people around me and the way that they think.
Okay, nice. And how did you, I guess, getting into the blog writing? I know you have a book. Have you released the book? Am I allowed to mention that?
You're allowed to mention anything, yeah. No, see. Well, no, maybe not. I mean, we can cut things out, but things, yeah.
With the book, is that released? I know it was going through, when I was speaking to you last, it was at different phases. You still haven't sent it to me, so I can't imagine that it's fully out in the open. Is it something that you're looking at putting out in the near future? And if so, is it something that you're open to talking about a bit?
Oh yeah, I love talking love talking about writing. So I'm very open to talking about that. And yeah, the book that was a long project that I've been working on since since I was 23 and I'm 27 now. So yeah, I suppose 4 years I've been kind of working at that. And yeah, I've a book finished, a novel, and yeah, it's one of those things that when you're working on something for such a long time on your own, it's very hard to start letting other people get involved in it. And I think you have to get to a point where you put down your like armor and say it's actually healthy to ask people for help. You have to let other people see it. But because it's something that I spent so long working on my own, it has been hard to ever feel like it's fully done. But I actually have an editor who's going to be looking at it in February, which I'm really excited about. And then my plan is to take that feedback on board and then try to get it published next year. And if I don't go down the traditional publishing route, look into self-publishing. But it's a lot more difficult getting published maybe than what people think, or maybe people already know that, but the traditional route is quite challenging.
Okay. And what then, when you're looking at writing a book, obviously writing a book and journaling are going to be two different things. When I was in school, I absolutely loved English. I thought it was not that I was any good at it, but I loved the creative expression of it. I loved the fact that there was nothing that you could ever really do that was wrong. That's why I thought poetry was such a great one, because for me, I couldn't write an answer that was wrong in it for a teacher to say, okay, you've done that wrong, as long as I was able to explain my points in some way or another. And I think that there's such a difference between that when you're looking at poetry, you're writing short stories and the leaving cert. But then when it comes to personal journaling and stuff that you're writing at home to yourself, what is for yourself, what is something that, or how would you differentiate between the two of them, where you're writing stories, or you're writing into like, you're kind of diving deep into that side of things, into the fiction side of it, and then where you're looking at journaling and journaling for yourself? What are the main differences between that?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like writing fiction for me is more like a whole process. There's a lot involved. Like when I journal, it's kind of just something I naturally do now. It's like I'm talking to myself. So it's like I open up this journal and I write it down, without even thinking. I get lost in it. And sometimes now it's actually gotten quite challenging for me, because I'll write something in my journal and then I'll be like, oh, maybe I should share that online. That looks quite good. So then I start to think a lot into the editing side of that. But yeah, when you look at novel writing, like of course, or short story writing, it's a very different process in one way to journaling, because journaling, you're kind of trying to get your thoughts and your emotions on paper. But like with novel or short stories, like I feel like anything I've written, it all came from the same reason though, like wanting to put an emotion or an idea that I was feeling at the time into something. And maybe like the story, wanting to create a story that kind of drove the inspiration. Now, when you start, it can be fun. And I love that feeling of like, I can just start writing a story for fun. And I think when you start writing a novel or a short story, you nearly have to look at it as a fun process, because if you get so bogged down in, I'm going to write a novel today, you're just going to be thinking loads about the end result. And, if you're constantly thinking about other people reading it, I had to kind of just learn to start thinking more about, let's have fun with this, and viewing it as something that's not just work. But the part that when it becomes work is now when I have been rereading and editing. And I've been you've heard me probably talking about this book to you the last few years, because it's something that I finished the first draft in maybe the first year and a half, but it's the going back over it, finding ways that it could be better, letting someone else read it, and then they point something out. so a big project like like a novel, for example, it's like there's a lot of trying to make the characters and the people relatable and thinking more about the outside world and the audience and how it's going to be interpreted. And sometimes I think that can block people from ever getting started because they might worry too much about how other people might respond. And whereas sometimes when you're journaling, I think you have this lovely free space to have fun on the page, which is why I started this writing for Wellbeing course. It was like a way for people to just explore their emotions and thoughts on paper and have fun with it, because I have a lot of creative like story activities. Yeah.
So it is definitely I guess they're two different spheres, but I'm sure doing one definitely complements the other. I'm sure that the novel writing has massively helped your journaling, and the way that you look at your journaling, the way you kind of form it or shape the pieces that you write. To stay on the novel side, I think, because I find that really interesting. What is it when you're looking at like how to develop a character, or when you're looking at how to make it resonate with someone that bit more? What are some of the aspects you're looking at specifically?
Yeah. So with me, like I love writing dialogue. And when I first started, because I did a creative writing MA, and when I joined that and I got into it, I used to have imposter syndrome at the start. So I was like, oh, I don't know all of these novelists. I haven't read all of the classics. I didn't feel like I was a very descriptive, detailed writer with all of the right words to choose from, but I could capture the way people speak really well. And that's something that I didn't even know I could do. And I thought it was a downside, like, why do I write the way I talk? But actually, that has helped me in making characters feel real. So, like, trying to write language that feels real. So, if I'm creating a character, of course, a lot of the time, there will be similarities with maybe people I know, but also just with phrases I hear. Like, if I'm out and about during the day and I might hear someone say something that's funny, and it might just come up when I'm writing a story, or like even just growing up living with my grandmother in rural Ireland, people coming in and out of the kitchen, just saying ridiculous things. Just you get funny ideas for people, for sentences. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you did. Because I was looking at like how do you help them to resonate with the characters a small bit more, but as you were saying, or maybe the way I picked it up was that your way of doing it specifically, it's more through how the person speaks and the phrases they use and the way they kind of structure their conversations. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, because I guess like there's a familiarity to language if you can write and speak, and if they act the way, someone in, let's say, in the book that I've written, a lot of it focuses on teenagers in Ireland. And it's like if you can capture the way different teenagers speak, and if it sounds somewhat familiar, that will relate. But, and you have to then allow room for like cursing, allow room for people who people might not like or might not relate with. But I think the heart of the story and the characters, for me, it's always kind of written. There's always a bigger reason why I'm writing anything I write. And if I want them to relate to someone, it's normally the emotion of the character. And so I look a lot at maybe I'm writing a character who's a bit difficult to read. There's some underlying stuff going on, but the way that they speak, they might seem like they're fine and happy and great, but then I love then being able to play around with getting inside the character's head or showing, that there's some more complexity to it. So yeah, I think looking at the appearance versus reality is quite fun with novel writing. And it's kind of a way to it's like another way to make people think more about things in their day-to-day life, but showing the inside of people's heads.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. I've been reading, I don't know if you've read any of his books, James Joyce. I've been reading his Dubliners book recently. Have you come across it?
Yeah, I have that at home.
It's, my God, he's able to paint a picture. Like for stories that are very basic, like he can really put you in the shoes of the person and the way they're going through their life. And I don't really know how to do it. I don't really know how he does it. But by the end of the story, he always cuts them off short as well. But by the end of the story, you're always looking for more. You're looking to really get into that person's life and get an understanding of their lifestyle more, in ways that you are saying how you can present someone up front, or how someone is presented up front, as well as what's going on in the background. That really ties into the journaling side of things, I feel, because with what you, on a day-to-day, that idea of the Japanese, where they say that we all have three faces: the faces that you show to someone else, the face that you show to somebody you love, and your actual real face, the face that you show to yourself. Now, I obviously butchered the quote, but that's the basic way of what it's described as. I think with journaling, there's ways, and I was listening to your podcast recently on journaling, where sometimes it feels like when you're writing, you're too embarrassed to write certain things in case somebody finds it. And I thought you had a great story there on Rowan, the way he used to go in and try to take your journals and look through them. Because when you were telling that story about how the brother comes in and looks for the journal and sees if they can crack the code, I used to do the exact same thing for my sister. So I could relate to that straight away. But how is it that you get over that phase? Because people do, and I have as well, when journaling, had to think, what if somebody picks this up?
You know, it's funny you said that, because I feel like that story I told, I feel like Rowan only tried to open my journal because it was like a full-on like padlocked one that had like a secret code to get in, and you had to use a voice that it was my voice, and then he managed to put on my voice, and he was like, open, and then it opened, and then it was more like the fun side. But I used to say to Mum and Rowan, like, I have so many journals at home in Karen, like it's ridiculous. Even now from traveling, I think I took a picture the other day. I must have, like, in the last few months, I've got maybe 12 or more journals in there filled up, and loads of books. Like I write to kind of make sense of things in my life. And now it's just a habit and a way for me to brainstorm. But I'd say, like, at home, I have all these journals sitting around, but I just know nobody cares enough to read them. But anyway,
if you put a lock on it, if you put a lock on it, then that's
if I put a lock on it, that's another thing. That's how you get them interested. Do not read, put a sticker.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, I do think last year when I started that whole A Good Kind of Scary, that was one of the big starting points for me of getting over that fear of letting people inside my head and letting people read more of my writing as well, outside of just the short stories and the novel writing. Because I shared a bit of like when I did the MA, I used to share that, and I've had a short story published recently, and
nice.
And different bits in different anthologies. So it was like feeling more confident with sharing my fiction was kind of the starting point. And then I feel like actually sharing your journals, though, and something that's non-fiction, not that I recommend everyone has to share their journals because it should be a safe space, but like actually I felt like there was something driving me to want to start a podcast, to want to blog and share more about like how I feel and what I think of the world, and more of what's going on in the background of what you just see from the outside of me. And I guess that was the Good Kind of Scary drive of getting over that fear. I think online it was great to have that platform, but I don't think it's something that happens overnight for me anyway. There's still times where I'll like share a piece of writing on Instagram, or you know, I'll write something now and I'll be like, I don't know if this is good or bad, and the ego gets in the way. But yeah, it's kind of looking at the purpose of why I'm writing something, and then being comfortable enough with like with sharing it. But also, to answer your question about, I don't know, was it about being scared if someone finds your journal and looks through it, or
yeah, no, well, I guess that, the question really was that when we, as I was mentioning that with the Japanese quote about like how we can show different faces at different times of our lives to different people, and how do you get over that stage when you're writing? Because at the start, when I started journaling, I felt that I was writing more for the face that you would put out in public. So the fact that there's a possibility that people may read it, where even though that might be a good thing in certain situations, it's not really at the essence of journaling. You know, it's not really the core of actual personal development or improving your awareness of yourself by any means. With journaling, how do you promote getting over that phase? What is there anything that you do for that, or have you come across that with other people that you're working with?
Yeah, like, so for example, in, let's say, I guess this is kind of relevant, but like in the Writing for Wellbeing course, the first group that I had, there was a few of us, and I know one of the guys, he was really excited to like share his writing, to improve his writing more. And I kind of said to him, like, this isn't about the quality that we're looking at. This isn't about what you're writing. This is about the process of writing. And it's about you being able to look at your work and feel okay with it without needing validation. And that's kind of what the course is about. And not to say, what was lovely is that, you know, we had a group of us and we check in each week and talk about how our journaling was going. But it wasn't like, okay, you share your writing and let's all tell each other that you're great. Because then, like what you said, it becomes, I didn't want it to be that, because, you know, that's kind of more about, yeah, the outside looking in and boosting your ego up and writing for other people and what they tell you is great, rather than, can I be okay with writing and how can I enjoy journaling and getting to know myself? And, you know, I think in The Artist's Way, it's a book by Julia Cameron. I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to get into writing, get more creative in their life. But what she recommends, Julia Cameron, is it's like a 10-week course in this book, doing morning pages every day as a way to like not write something amazing, but to declutter all of what's in your mind from the outside world, from the thoughts, from the busyness. And then that can help you start to slowly get to something better or bigger. And, you know, I find that sometimes I'll just pick up my journal and I won't plan to write anything. And that could be when the best thing could come out, or at least I think. I'm like, oh, that feels really real and raw and like me. And I think what I've been trying to do more online is to show more of that other layer that you spoke about, or try to show all of the layers, because I think we all just see, like what you said, what maybe people want us to see.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot as well when it comes to writing. I know you mentioned the guy there who was saying that he wanted to improve his writing, but you often hear authors or like some of the great thinkers talk about writing as a way of thinking. And if you can improve your writing, you can improve the way you think. And obviously the language that you use around that, and I think a lot of how we think obviously comes back to the language that we use and how we speak to ourselves. And I think that some people really speak to themselves very negatively, but in very broad terms. So it's like, instead of saying, and in my example of someone who's if I'm working with them and they have a sore back, or if their back is at them, they'll often say that I have a bad back, but that doesn't really give a good description of what way your back is. It doesn't really give a good description of your internal or external environment at all, because you've just painted it with the same brush. You paint everything with the same brush. So it's oftentimes trying to refine it and being a lot more specific on the language that they're using, where it's like, do you have a bad back, or has your back flared up when you have tried to increase your exercise too fast? You know, that's a lot more specific, because then it's like, well, what if we just worked on building up step by step how to get to that point, and look at building up your tolerance to exercise? You know, there's loads of different ways you can see it, where it's like, I always get injured. Do you always get injured, or do you always get injured when you do too many things too fast and in too short a time without doing, what's the saying? It's like you often get injured when you do too much too fast after doing too little too long. Okay. But if people paint it with this broad brush, a lot of times that then dictates the way they think about themselves, and as a result dictates the beliefs that they have. So I think when it comes to writing and when it comes to the language you use, there is two sides to it. There's obviously the creative expression of it, and the side that you're really trying to kind of get a better understanding of what you're feeling like. But I think the better you get at picking certain phrases in different language, I think the better you are able to journal, in a sense. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I think, like, just for sure. I mean, everything you said there, even around, like, we definitely limit ourselves, and even just the terms good and bad too. I think that was another motivation behind why I started this Writing for Wellbeing course, is because I wanted people to let themselves be bad at writing, because you have to kind of let yourself be bad to also let yourself get good at it. And yeah, having more words to choose from, definitely that comes from reading as well, though, not just, I guess, writing and listening to people. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about, even with regards to like expressing our emotions in Irish culture too, or just in all cultures, like the limited vocabulary we sometimes have. And yeah, why is it though that writing can be very beneficial? And yeah, there's a lot to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you, I heard you mention that comes from reading. It does, it obviously does come from reading. So before, I would never have really considered reading fiction. I was always about like, so Grace described it once. My sister described it as like, you're always reading those self-help books. And I was like, first off, let's not use the language self-help because it sounds, I don't like the sound of it.
It sounds what it is.
Yeah, exactly. I don't like the sound of it. So let's look at it a different way. But she was like, you need to start looking into fiction too, because overall it'll improve your whole perspective on other things and as well as how you phrase it, and it can tie in well. What do you feel is a difference there with reading your fiction and reading nonfiction? Where, like, what do you think the interplay is between them, or what do you think the benefit is of reading either?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that because I've also gotten obsessed with reading nonfiction self-help books. And I was like, oh my God, am I just obsessed with trying to fix myself or like help myself? And I started a book club out here in Perth recently, and I was like, oh, well, let everyone have a say. And all the books other people have been choosing are fiction books, but it's good because it's getting me back into enjoying fiction again. But I could feel myself resisting it at times and going for the nonfiction or the self-help book. And I think one of the big differences for me anyway is that sometimes fiction, I use it more as like an escape to maybe not think about the world if I want to like just kind of zone out. And it's so lovely when you're lost in a book and then and you just don't notice the pages go by. You're not like looking up at the numbers, but the story just flows really well. And it doesn't always happen. It happened recently. I read a book by Donal Ryan. He's a great Irish author, Queen of Dirt Island, and I just like finished it really quickly, and it was made me love fiction again. But non-fiction and self-help books, I feel like there's a lot of looking, once again, you're looking at the world around you, the way people think. And sometimes it feels like I feel like I'm at lectures sometimes when I'm reading reading books, because sometimes I'll take notes. And I used to really like lectures in college and that part of studying nearly. So I don't know, is it me like feeling like I'm learning and being productive? I don't know if it's that feeling that I like, or, you know, can you relate to that?
Yeah, I think so as well. I think that's probably part of it, is that if I'm reading something, I want to be getting something from it. Very kind of that way focused in a lot of things. So I think that idea of disconnection is huge as well. I've been able to just disconnect from the world. But there's something about being in a story though, where, like, as I was saying with James Joyce, like the stories aren't exactly they're not like a Harry Potter or anything like that. They tell stories about a guy who goes to the pub and drinks too much and then comes home and gets angry at his family. You know, like it's very like very specific, very, very specific stories, but it's more the detail and how he can really draw you into it, I feel, for that. So I don't know how you can take that and apply it to your life. Obviously, that's maybe I'm wrong in even trying to consider that. Is there, like, should you be looking at the benefits, or is it just it is as it is? But I feel that there is a lot of benefits. So maybe I'm wrong in looking at it that way. Am I? What's up, guys? Robbie here. I hope you are enjoying the podcast so far. I want to take a moment just to personally ask you for your help. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you be willing to share it with someone you think would love it too? Maybe a friend, family member on social media, or even if you just brought it up in conversation with someone you know. The recommendation means the world to us, and it's because of people like you that we get to be able to produce this podcast on a weekly basis. So thank you so much for your support so far, and I would love if you could help us reach even more people who could benefit from it too. Really appreciate you, and we're going to jump straight back to the podcast.
Yeah, no, and you know, I get that mindset, and sometimes I've become more aware of that when that creeps up too. Like, oh, I've this many books to read, or I need to get through these books, or what will this book be? And someone at book club will pick a book I'm not interested in, and it's like, oh. But it's like it's no more than when you go to watch a movie that you're not really going to like, but maybe someone who you likes the movie. So it's like, okay, it's also good to read things that you don't like sometimes. And I spoke to a writer, a poet, Michael Pedersen, at the Ubud Writers Festival the other week, and he said that if you want to get good at writing, that's what all of them said: read and read and read. And even if you don't like something, like being able to engage with something and actually explain why you don't like it can kind of, he said, help you understand yourself better. And then knowing that you can form opinions that maybe are different to other people's, and you can allow yourself to maybe stop reading something if you're not enjoying it. But I think fiction, for me, if it's a story that I'm enjoying and like, then it's kind of just it can be therapeutic, no more than I find it some movies that I love, like some sappy movies. If I'm feeling emotional and there's a good movie or a good book that I can like have a little cry at, I'm just like, oh, that was worth it. Or it just it restores your faith in humanity, rather than sometimes I think just reading books that are like, we have to get better, but that can be nice getting lost in a story too.
Yeah, for sure. An emotional release by any means. It's I think that's something that I'm trying to explore more in terms of getting into that, the fiction side of things, and maybe dabbling a bit more. But I think a time of the day is important for me as well. In terms of in the morning time, I'm probably a bit more focused on reading the nonfiction. In the evening time, I'll probably be a bit more focused on reading the fiction. I think there's a nice interplay between the two of them, where like one of them is setting me up for the day, the other one is kind of helping me calm down at night. But in that regard, though, I think I'm probably doing this the wrong way when I think about it out loud, because I'm reading the nonfiction in the morning and then I'll try to do a bit of journaling. I couldn't really, like, that makes the journaling very structured in a way, because it's all about development. Then everything is about improving yourself and development. But when it comes to journaling, there's so many different aspects of it, so many different ways you can look at it. What are some of the reasons that you would journal, or how do you look at journaling as a whole?
Yeah, so I think I said earlier, like, I have so many journals at home, and like I journal as a way to make sense of my thoughts or my opinions as well, because sometimes I think in our heads, or at least in my head, I could have like a load of ideas coming up and a load of thoughts about things, and I'd be like, okay, just need to put pen to paper, write some of this out, and then you can kind of separate your thoughts from yourself as well. So definitely use it when the mind's a bit noisy, but also it can just be, for me, it's like a way to connect with myself. Like, I absolutely love if I wake up in the morning and like I said, those morning papers, I don't do them every single morning first thing, but I did the other morning, and it was just like flowing so easily when you're kind of in that half asleep, half awake state. Whereas if I tried to do it during the day, it might not come out the same. And it's kind of like having fun on the page for me when I'm writing. But a big thing with journaling, one of the biggest things that I'd always promote to people, and how it all started, I think, is gratitude journaling. And I've mentioned that to quite a few people, but someone bought me a journal when I was like 19, a gratitude journal, and it was like, write 3 things you're grateful for every day, and it was a full year. And some days I'd be like, Jesus, like, do I have to? It started to become tedious, It was like, oh God, like, oh, what am I going to write? I'd be like, oh, I'm grateful for a pen. I wasn't even thinking too much. And then as time went by, I was writing down little moments, and it wasn't even about like, oh, I am grateful for like a very repetitive affirmation thing, but it became more like, this happened today. This happened today. This person got me a sandwich. I read back on my journals. It's always the funniest things. It's like, what was I? You think that the things you're going to write are the big events, but it's like, oh, had a coffee with this person, or chatted to someone on the phone today, and it helped me keeping a gratitude journal. I noticed throughout that year my mood improved. And then I also had all of these little moments to look back on that, like I said, it was during my year abroad in California, I also had one. And I remember if you out loud, you'd be like, oh, I went to the Grand Canyon, I did this, I did that. But looking back at this journal, there was none of really that. It was all these little moments. So it started to make me appreciate the little moments more in life, but also it made me realize what I probably appreciate in my day-to-day life, or what, outside of maybe what everyone else was doing. Because, you'd sometimes do things, but if I wasn't writing that in my gratitude journal, I probably wasn't enjoying it.
Yeah, it is the little things that, like, I noticed that as well in the journaling, because if you try to think of the big things all the time, sometimes you're making something a lot more unrealistic than it actually is. You're trying to make a bigger thing of something that was small, when it is nice to just write, like, clean my room today, went to the shop, like just little small things that go a long way.
The James Joyce status.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, it's a nice way of kind of checking in on the smaller things. I don't know. Was it me and you chatting before a couple of months ago? We were talking about gratitude journaling, and I said that I need to introduce this into the meditation side of things and what I'm doing, as opposed to, like, because I've a habit of journaling, but I probably journal maybe once a week, twice a week. If I was looking at it on a broad spectrum, like, maybe some weeks I might do it 4 or 5 times, and then I might not do it for a week. So I'm not as consistent, but I'm very consistent with a meditation practice or meditative practice recently, for the last couple of months anyway. And I think that I have a few different ones, but isolating and looking at the gratitude side of it, even when you do it and when you make conscious, like, you're trying to be conscious about the small things that really have an effect on your life, and the small things that can, to be grateful for every day, I guess the easiest way to say it, it really sets you up for the day. Like, your mindset changes. You start to see it in everything. Like, when you go in and whatever, you go into the shop and there's one bottle or there's one orange left or something like that, you can be grateful that, like, oh, that's ideal. That's all I needed. I didn't need any more than this. I think there's loads of different, obviously different scenarios, but when you do get into the practice of doing it, now I don't do gratitude every day. This morning I did more of it. Let's say, I don't even know what it is, a transcendental, where you focus on one word and you say that consistently. But I find that with the gratitude side of things, it can set you up for the day after so well. But it really comes down to the prompts that you use. Like, as you said there, I am grateful for, you get bored of that after a while. So the little things that you can include and stick in, but have the same theme, I guess, is theme the right word for it? Or it's the same idea you're going into it. You kind of have one mindset going into it. What other ways do you look at that? I listened to your podcast recently on questions and the questions that you ask yourself and the questions you ask other people. How do you integrate that into your journaling?
Asking you, I remember you actually had mentioned that you write a question in your journal and then you come back to it and answer it another day. I think I experimented with that a few times, and it definitely is interesting. I guess with questions in general, a big one that I've found really helpful for me, with journaling, or just even throughout the day, like what you said, once you kind of start writing certain things on paper, you might then start thinking them, throughout the day. But like, what do I need today? It's not even really necessarily like the start of a big journaling passage, but just that's how I use journaling to kind of check in with myself now, or what do I need tomorrow to kind of help me feel okay? Just a basic question. I mean, that kind of just asking myself maybe what I need. Other than that, I can't think on the spot of more questions. Do you have any ones you'd like to share?
No, I was going to say, because what you mentioned there at the start is actually, I took that's from that the writer Hemingway, though he writes at nighttime then he wakes up the next day.
Jeez, you're reading more of the classics than I am. Sorry,
this is over
go
time.
on.
This is over time.
Yeah.
This is over time. But it was he writes it. He said an easy way of thinking, or for his actually specific way of doing it, I think is what he used to stop in the middle of a sentence when he was writing a novel, and then he wouldn't ever finish the sentence. So the next morning when he got up, he was able to just continue on with that sentence, like as the first thing that came to mind. His idea was that you can connect the subconscious and the conscious through this like half sleep state, which you talked about earlier on. You know, where you're in that kind of state that you're half conscious, but you're not completely aware of everything that's going on in the world and all the good and bad. And he uses that. That's something that I started to integrate a bit more. But when it comes to the question side of things, I think it comes back to just the way I've been thinking recently. It's very performance based. It's like, what's the optimal way to do this? What's the a nice question that I use? It's from a book called The One Thing, and it's literally you don't have to read the book because it's in the title. I don't know how he was able to get away with writing a book after it, but it's a philosophy around business about what's the one thing that you can do each week that's going to have the biggest impact on your life or your business. If you had to just pick one thing, and then you focus on that each week after. So that's something that I often use if I am journaling. What is the one thing that has the biggest effect? Let's say.
I know, and I think that's powerful, and I think like questions too. Maybe when I'm not using them, sometimes maybe you might be avoiding something as well. And like definitely in a lot of the prompts I have on the course, I've tons of journaling prompts I took time to make, all inspired by different self-help books and business books and like that. But looking at questions, there is something really confronting that they are so helpful because they kind of put a big stop to the train of thoughts that you could be having of like, oh, what am I going to do? When am I going to do this? So I'm not going to have, but just asking like, oh, what do I need now? Or, you know, in the next week, what can I do? But a friend recently, when I went to Bali, I noticed because I was kind of ranting on about something, and she just went like, well, like, I just think she just stopped me and was like, do you want to do it? And I just went, no. She's like, okay, then that's it. And I was like, oh my God, that was so easy. But it was like just having a person. Sometimes we wait for people maybe to ask us the questions rather than taking time out ourselves to do it. And that was a reminder to me, like, oh, I hadn't probably been taking time out to ask myself, you know, these questions. I'd maybe been doing more of the repeating positive affirmations, writing down good things, but not actually taking time out to reflect and ask questions.
Yeah, but it does. I think sometimes when someone else asks you the question, then it kind of sparks it. I think obviously that's why people work with coaches in a lot of ways. It sparks a different way of thinking, or it gives you a different perspective on how to think about it. In that situation where they're like, do you want to do it? And it's like, you kind of know you don't want to confront it. You don't want to do it, but you don't want to confront it. You don't want to do it. So you're kind of waiting for someone else to give you the leeway to say like, if you don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. It's not, in a lot of ways, like it's not, you have to do it, but sometimes you need someone else to point that out.
And someone also, I think it was because maybe I'd ranted about it to other people and they hadn't shown that side. It's like someone saying that it's okay to not do it or to not agree with what you're talking about. It's like someone else, like what you said, showing you another way to think and saying it's okay for you, like giving you the option to make the decision yourself. Whereas other people might be like, why would you not do that? You know, it's a great opportunity, or do this, or think about this, or, you know, so yeah, sometimes it's about the person for sure.
But I think as well, in that idea of where someone's like, are you sure? Like, you're that, it comes back to the language that you use. A lot of people, I feel that if they're very empathetic, that they'll try to kind of measure how you're talking, and they will try to pick up on the emotions that you are, and they'll try to kind of reinforce those emotions because they don't want to go against what you're saying in a lot of ways. And that can be obviously very positive and very negative. Well, not very, let's say there's positives and negatives to it, where sometimes you're like, I don't really know. Like, I recently came across this with, I was chatting to someone about a new relationship that they were in. And they said, oh, my friend said that there wasn't, she said it wasn't a good idea. And I was like, how did you phrase it to them when you said that? and they were like, I was kind of ifing and butting, and I was kind of trying to get their reinforcement to say that it was okay to do it, but they were actually copying what I was saying, and they were copying my confusion, or what's the word for it, where you're like, you're not completely convicted. What's the word? You probably
like you're apprehensive or not sure about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, where you're apprehensive about it, and where you're apprehensive about it, you're not too sure about what you're going to do, and they're kind of mirroring that emotion back to you, and as a result, they're coming to a conclusion of what they feel that you're thinking, when really you're looking for a different answer. You're looking to be reassured. And I was like, "Do you think it's a good idea yourself?" And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, why is it? Why is it a problem then?" So, in a very similar situation to what you're talking about.
It's like you're looking more at like peer approval, or like what other people think. But even like listening to you having that conversation with someone, to have that awareness, I feel like I'm very aware now, but I feel like there's, a lot of us, you're not. And then you come out of those conversations and you might think, okay, that's it. I'm not going to do that now. They don't think it's a good idea. But to be aware of the body language and the way you're speaking and how someone's mirroring it, we often don't see the impact of the people we surround ourselves with, of the language we use, of the places we are. And you talked about that in your recent podcast episode, the one on being a hermit, about all of that, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, you're a bit of a hermit yourself at the minute.
Yeah, I am. I've always been a bit of a hermit, I think, but people wouldn't know. I'd go through phases. It'd be like I could maybe be all out, and then I could like retreat and hide, and happily be at home, like reading and writing. I feel like I'm always someone that if I'm on my own, I'd never be bored. Like there's always something I'd be thinking of doing anyway. So some people might struggle to sit with themselves. I feel like, I'll always be like, oh, I have another project I want to do, or ideas, or I can write, or I can read. Yeah. I feel like I nearly have the opposite problem, that I'm like, oh, I need to spend more time chilling now, being okay with not being productive when I'm on my own all the time. I don't know if you can relate to that in the hermit life.
In the hermit life, I probably struggle with the side of it, of not being productive as much, or trying not to be productive. That's a mindset that I have to battle with, because I think for years I was definitely on more of the social side of things, where I was like really, really trying to always have like a big group of friends and be around a lot of people, and I was trying to be very social, I guess is the word, for a good while. And then when I went into boxing, I kind of retracted from that, and I was becoming a bit more of a hermit at that stage. And then I got out of that, got into college, and I was getting back into the social scene. And I feel like it goes in you have those ebbs and flows. I think it kind of goes in cycles of what's most important to you right now. And at this stage in my life, I think being a hermit is the nice part of it. But I feel like when maybe in the next couple of months, I might ease out of that again, because there is positives and negatives to it. There definitely is positives and negatives to it. I think one of the ones is that your social interactions change, and they just become very surface level interactions in a lot of ways. You're just talking to people. How are you? How are things? Are you good? Good, yeah. Out here, todo bien, boss, bien. That's about the max of the conversation that I have with the most people that I meet. What do you think?
But that's because then you're not taking time out to invest maybe in new like relationships or friendships with people. Then if you're But I think it's hard when you go to a new place anyway, because it takes a long time to develop that. I found that when I was in Bali for a few months, it took a while until I did start to maybe to meet people, but also being okay with like, oh, I don't actually have to, having that choice of like, I don't have to have a big group of best friends here, because I have, best friends at home or in different parts of the world, and like being okay enough with yourself to think I don't have to be around people all the time. It's okay that I'm not, and you spoke about that, it's okay, I'm not going out and doing this or that, because it's like knowing that you could go and make friends with a bunch of, random people who you might, share some interests with, but it's still very surface level, versus yeah, taking time out to yourself. But like you still get involved in communities. And I think that's something that I've learned to prioritize this year more, is looking for communities with people with other similar interests, outside of just drinking, and looking at that way of socializing. And that's been a big one for me, because I feel like whenever at home, a lot of my social life was maybe going out on nights out with friends. And then like I would spend all my like writing and all of the other things I did like that was something I did in solitude, and I didn't really share it as much with people. Whereas now I'm like, oh, this could be more of a community type thing. I can find writers groups. I can, go see swimming in groups with people. I can do other things other than just going out, with my friends.
Yeah, it is. It's a habit in Ireland though, isn't it? Like it's obviously the weather's not the best a lot of the time. So it's more inclined to just, oh, well, we go down to the pub and we'll go for a pint, or like it's the knee-jerk reaction of like, we could just do this because it's the easiest thing and we all know how it works and we've done it so many times before. So we may as well just stick with that routine. I think pushing yourselves into those communities, I think communities is a great word for it as well, actually. I think it's an excellent word for it, because that's what it is. Like out here, I have my, let's say, jiu-jitsu community, and then I'll have community people that are working online, and then I'll have community people that I just watch UFC with. Like there's like a kind of different communities at different phases, and they don't actually interact that much. While at home, I think you have those, but it's a lot smaller, so they do interact as much. And all you need is one person to say, let's go out, and then the other person like will back that up. Yeah, 100%. And then you kind of get that fear of FOMO. If you don't go out, what's it going to be like? Are you going to miss it? So I think at home, I would definitely look at how people can build those little communities. And that on a Friday, I was working with people, or working with a lady who started an excellent community of sea or lake swimming on like a Friday is what it was. She was like, every Friday she goes down, she just was doing it herself. And then she just asked a friend to come, and then they asked another friend to come. And now there's like a group of women that go down all together, dip in the lake on a Friday morning. It's such a good idea though, because you have your little thing to look forward to on a Friday. It's like every Friday I'm going to look forward to this.
So out here, since I came out to Perth, one of the main things that's been like my big social event of the week is on a Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. It's now, we go sea swimming, a group of us. And two lads started out here, and they said they started a couple of years back, and it was just supposed to be a few friends going for a swim each week as a way to kind of do something outside of the drinking aspect. And then they said all of a sudden there was hundreds of people coming down, but it kind of showed like how people were craving a community or a sense of connection outside of, because you can still get that surface level conversation on nights out, except maybe after a few drinks you could be like spilling your heart to someone you barely know, and then waking up the next day living in constant fear for like a week that you'll see them. But yeah, so it's lovely. Like I just love, there's something about swims. People are getting so into them now, and I think it's great. And just being out in nature, and just doing things with people and having little things to look forward to. I think that is important. Because the hermit life is definitely very lonely if you don't have, some stuff to look forward to, I think, and some people to reach out to.
Yeah, it is. And I think that having those things as well, when they're kind of in the routine, I say that to anyone I'm working with, is that like just saying you're going to get the session done and get them done during the week is very difficult to do that, because we'll come Tuesday night after work, you're like, oh, I couldn't really be arsed. I'll do it tomorrow because I have 5 more days. Then come Wednesday, exact same thing. It's the middle of the week. One of your TV shows, your favorite show, starts at 9:00. So you need to be sure that you're back for that. So you put it off another day, and you can just see how the pattern repeats itself. Then people find it so hard to actually get into the routine of doing it. But I think when you have those set routines, that like one excellent thing we should mention it, or I should mention it, about Ireland that they have is the community around GAA is so good. I think and I think it really holds people together. And for both men and women, I think it's massive, because it gives people an opportunity to meet on a Tuesday and a Thursday night and a Sunday morning. And they all meet together and they meet in the same group. And it's like a little community that everyone has. And then there's obviously all the families that come and watch the games and stuff like that. But I think it's underappreciated, and I really miss that. I really miss that from being there. Here, I play a bit of football, Argentinian team. It's a great little day out. They go and they make a little barbecue and everything after, but there's something nice about the consistency of, okay, Tuesday night, 7 o'clock, we'll go. It doesn't matter if it's raining, doesn't matter if it's a lovely day. We're all going to go down together. And then oftentimes, because we're lucky enough at home that we can go down for a dip in the sea after. I think creating those communities is important. I think it's really, really important for people, because even if you're not having the deepest conversations with the people around you in that situation, I think that at times it's very powerful for just having the feeling of that there's other people around you, and other people, like meeting other people, I guess is kind of the easiest way, the social aspect of it. Is that the way to look at it?
Yeah, for sure. And especially if people were like feeling lonely or isolated, it's like, oh, knowing that they were going to be seeing these people or have something to look forward to, and it might not be a massive thing, but yeah, I suppose it has multiple levels of like the fitness side, and then the social benefits without the pressure of maybe having to hang around until 2 a.m, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And then wake up the next day dying a slow death.
Not that I'm completely like giving out about nights out, but yeah, it's just kind of realizing that that's not the only way that you can like socialize, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think as well, Tish, for now, I think that's a nice point to kind of finish up the podcast on, or to move in a, I guess to finish it up for now. But before we do, I wanted to ask you a quick question about, so there's a couple of different ways you can ask this question. One of them is, what does health mean to you? That's one question that I often ask people. Okay, but I know that you're involved in more of the well-being side of things at the moment with the writing, obviously, the book club and the swims and everything like that. So I'd actually prefer to ask you the question, what's a good life? Do you know when someone says this is the good life? Yeah. What's a good life for you?
Yeah, I think a good life for me is I feel like feeling really, once again, content and happy with the little moments in your day-to-day life. And I mean, I feel like having some sort of purpose definitely is what a good life to me at the moment, just being able to write and read, but also I think having people who you love and people who love you. And I think, like we spoke about, that sense of community. But yeah, to me, I don't think a good life needs to be about, but for my personal values, having loads of wealth and power and success necessarily, but feeling happy in your own personal achievements. And, you know, even if you're writing, and even if it doesn't become like bestsellers, or you don't, you know, not everyone doesn't know who you are. It's more just about like, why are you doing what you're doing? And just being grateful probably for the little moments. But I think if I can like wake up and feel like content enough with my day, that's, I don't know, does that answer it?
It does, yeah. Well, what's a situation that when you're there that you would say, this is the good life?
See, I feel like we all wait that we're going and think we're going to reach a point where we get to the good life, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think like we have to, I think now I feel really lucky. I'm like, oh, I feel like I have good days and I have some days that aren't great. And I feel like, I feel like a good life is when you also start getting comfortable with being yourself and accepting you, and not just always racing towards this, great life. But I mean, of course, like, I don't know, it would be nice to have certain things. Like, I'd like at the moment to have more of a permanent base of my own. But yeah, I think like a lot of us, when you have a good life picture painted, I think that can be a bit scary in a way, or maybe dangerous, because it's like you're aiming for something, but you're never really going to reach that finish line. Life's going to keep going on. So I think it's just about, I think rather than looking at a good life, what's a good day, and how can you focus more on like having more of those days? Because I think sometimes we can get lost in like, I'm going to aim for next year this, but then you're missing out on the 365 days, all aiming for that one day next year.
Yeah. No, 100%. I think that even the phrasing there in the way I phrased it, I guess really what I meant more is that what's a situation that you're sitting in? Like for me, if I'm sitting and I have a few friends around me and I'm looking out and I'm at the beach, or if I'm going for a swim or looking out at the sunset, I think that's a nice time to reflect and be content and say that this is this is what the life is. It's not as much of a looking in the future of what's the best moments or what's an optimal life. In the moment, what are moments that you feel like this is the way it should be?
Yeah, whenever you asked me the question, an image of the Flaggy Shore popped up in my head.
Yeah.
I really love that walk along by the Flaggy Shore, and I feel like it's somewhere I'd go anytime to just, I'd be like, I'm just going to go here and this is my happy place. But yeah, I feel like looking out at the sea, that's a place that for me makes the good life and makes the good life. And having those just little things, having the moments where I'm like, the other day I was laughing in the sun with some of my friends and just being silly. And I was just like, oh, this is good. Just those little moments. I think a combination of that makes up the good life, the people you spend of it and maybe being out in nature. And I think of my cat Shibby at home and like he's pretty good. So yeah, just all those little things.
Shibby, what a name. Okay, I think that's all for now, Saoirse. If there's anything, first off, I would ask you about the course at the minute. Obviously the podcast, excellent podcast. I would recommend everyone to go check it out. Some really good topics on there and some really good guests on it as well. Otherwise, in relation, and the blog, I should mention, my apologies, I should mention the blog. I didn't mention that at the start. I know you corrected me on it. Is there any other ways that people can reach out to you? What is the course at the moment? Is it open for people to join? Is it in development? What's I guess to finish.
Yeah, so you can find me at agoodkindofscary.com or on Instagram at agoodkindofscary. And at the moment, throughout the next 2 months, I'm kind of focused on posting a lot around mental health and well-being and emotions and journaling. So being really involved in that and kind of making my social media pages more of a community vibe as well. But outside of that, I do have the course Writing for Wellbeing. I've just taken a bit of a pause with sign-ups, but it will be opening up again soon. So yeah, you can check that out as well at A Good Kind of Scary. And or message me for any more information.
Lovely stuff. Okay, thank you so much, Saoirse. For now, though, I think we'll leave it at that. If anyone has any questions or wants to reach out to Saoirse, definitely check it out. Good Kind of Scary. And the podcast is on Spotify. It's on iTunes, possibly on YouTube. On YouTube? No, not on YouTube. No. Okay.
I was shaking my head. Cut it. No, now I'm gonna have to put it on YouTube. That'll be the next. Once my equipment, with my equipment updates, I'll do that.
Okay, guys, thank you all for listening in, and girls, thank you all for listening in. And I will chat to you all again next week. Have a good one. Okay, guys, thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you're looking to learn more about what we do, as well as check out any of the mobility and prehab programs we have available, just head over to the description of this podcast and you will find a link to all the programs there. As always, thank you for listening, and I will chat to you all again in the next episode. Have a good one.